No one expected the end of human civilization to begin with a gentle chime. Dr. Sarah Chen was analyzing quantum entanglement data in her lab at the Quantum Communications Institute when every screen in the facility turned a soft, luminescent blue. The same color appeared on her phone, her tablet, and even the smart watch on her wrist. For exactly 3 seconds, the world hummed with a perfect A-sharp note. Then everything went dark. Sarah's first thought wasn't about the alien ships that had appeared in Earth's orbit 2 hours earlier. It wasn't about the strange, crystalline structures that had begun materializing above major cities worldwide. Instead, she found herself fixated on the fact that her quantum oscillation experiment was still running. It shouldn't have been possible. The test equipment required complex electronic controllers to function, yet the quantum particles were still maintaining their entangled state. The readouts were analog, the kind of backup systems she'd insisted on despite budget constraints, and they showed something impossible. The quantum field was growing stronger. Dr. Chen, her research assistant, James Wong, stood in the doorway, his face illuminated by emergency lighting. "The military's here. They're evacuating the building." Sarah held up her hand, eyes fixed on the steadily rising amplitude of the quantum field. "1 minute," she murmured, quickly sketching the wave pattern in her paper notebook. "James, are you seeing this? The entanglement isn't just maintaining itself, it's expanding." A uniformed officer appeared behind James. "Dr. Chen, we need to move now. The Arctians have begun their occupation protocol." "The who?" Sarah reluctantly tore her eyes away from the readings. "The aliens," the officer explained, his patience clearly wearing thin. "They're calling themselves the Arctian Empire. They've just implemented something they call a peaceful assimilation protocol. Every electronic communication system on Earth has been disabled." Sarah gestured at her still-functioning experiment. "Not everything." The officer stepped forward, interest flickering across his face. "What do you mean?" "Our quantum communication test array is still operational. More than operational, it's showing increased activity levels." She turned to James. "Get me the geological sensors. The analog ones." James hurried to comply while the officer, his nameplate read Martinez, spoke quietly into a hand-cranked radio. Sarah could hear fragments about potential anomalies and scientific assets. The building shook slightly as one of the crystalline structures descended from the sky, settling into position above downtown Boston. Through the lab's windows, Sarah could see its translucent surface refracting sunlight into prismatic patterns across the city skyline. It was beautiful, in a terrifying sort of way. James returned with a handful of old-fashioned seismometers and geological testing equipment. Sarah quickly began setting them up around the quantum array, her movements precise despite the urgency of the situation. "What are you looking for?" Martins asked, his evacuation orders apparently superseded by new instructions. "Quantum fields don't exist in isolation," Sarah explained, adjusting a sensor. "They interact with everything. Gravity, electromagnetic fields, even biological systems. If the Arctians are using quantum technology to suppress our electronics, there should be measurable effects on." She trailed off, staring at the readings. Oh, that's interesting." "What is it?" James and Martinez asked simultaneously. Sarah straightened up, her expression a mixture of concern and scientific fascination. "The quantum suppression field they're using. It's not just affecting our technology. It's resonating with something else, something that's already here." Above them, the crystalline structure pulsed with a soft light, and a voice filled the air, not through speakers or any discernible technology, but as if the air molecules themselves were vibrating in perfect synchronization. "People of Earth," the voice announced, its tone benevolent yet somehow deeply unsettling. "I am High Commander Vix of the Arctian Empire. Your planet is now under our protection. Resist not, for we have already won. Your technology is neutralized, your militaries are powerless, and your governments have surrendered. The age of human independence has ended. The age of Archean guidance begins. Sarah looked back at her sensors, then at the quantum array, then out at the cityscape where more crystalline structures were descending from the clouds. She pulled out her notebook and began writing rapidly. "They think they've won," she murmured, "because they think they understand what they're dealing with. But they've made 3 crucial mistakes." She held up her hand, ticking off points. 1. They assumed our quantum research was purely theoretical. 2. They didn't realize we've been documenting unusual quantum field patterns in Earth's biosphere for the past decade. And 3. She smiled slightly. They apparently never read the Galactic Council's regulations about proper planetary survey protocols. Martinez frowned. "What are you talking about? What Galactic Council?" Sarah pointed to a particular reading on one of her sensors. "See this pattern? It's nearly identical to the quantum signature we detected last year during the dolphin intelligence studies, the ones that had to be discontinued because of unexplainable data anomalies." She looked up at Martinez and James. "I don't think those anomalies were errors. I think we were detecting something that the Archeans have just made dramatically more visible." She turned to Martinez. "I need you to get me access to the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, and I need every piece of mycological research data from the past 5 years." She paused, then added, "And if anyone has a way to contact the elephants' rights activists in Kenya, we're going to need them too." The elephant activists. Martinez looked completely lost now. "Doctor, with all due respect, what does any of this have to do with resisting an alien invasion?" Sarah began packing up her notebook and the portable sensors. "Everything, Captain, because the Archeans just violated the first rule of galactic conquest. Always check for multiple sentient species before claiming a planet." She gestured at the quantum array, still humming with unexplained energy. "And thanks to their own technology, we can now prove it." Outside, the crystalline ships continued their silent descent, their occupants completely unaware that their perfect conquest had just given humanity exactly what it needed to challenge their claim to Earth. In her head, Sarah was already composing the first draft of what would become a very interesting legal brief for the Galactic Council. The Archeans had won their battle without firing a shot, but in doing so, they'd handed Earth the tools for a very different kind of victory. The underground lab at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute smelled of seawater and damp earth. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before a wall of glass tanks filled with bioluminescent fungi, their gentle blue glow casting ethereal shadows across her face. Each tank contained samples collected from different ocean depths, all connected to what Dr. Maya Patel had dubbed the Wood Wide Web. "You're telling me," Captain Martinez said slowly, "that mushrooms can communicate?" Maya adjusted her microscope with practiced precision. "Not just communicate, Captain. They form vast networks that transfer information, nutrients, and even what we might call memories across entire continents. Think of it as Earth's original internet." "And it's still working," Sarah added, checking readings from her quantum sensors. "The Archean's suppression field doesn't affect it at all. In fact, it's making the network more active." The past week had transformed the Institute's mycology lab into an impromptu resistance headquarters. Maps covered the walls, marking known fungal networks across the globe. Teams of scientists worked around the clock, correlating data from Sarah's quantum readings with Maya's fungal communication patterns. James Wong burst into the lab, waving a printout from one of their few remaining working printers. Analog technology jury-rigged to function despite the Archean suppression field. "You need to see this," he gasped. "The dolphins. They're responding." Sarah grabbed the paper. It showed a complex wave pattern, a perfect match for the quantum signatures they'd been tracking. "How many?" "Pods all along the eastern seaboard," James replied. "They're gathering near the communication nodes we set up. The patterns aren't random, Dr. Chen. They're organized. Above ground, one of the Archean crystalline ships drifted past the Institute's windows. The aliens had spent the past week consolidating their control, seemingly oblivious to the activity happening beneath their feet. Their confidence in their technology's superiority had made them careless. Maya pointed to a particularly dense cluster of mycological activity on one of their maps. The network's strongest here, off the coast of South Africa. And look at the temporal patterns. They align perfectly with known elephant migration routes. Sarah traced the patterns with her finger. They've been using it all along, she murmured. The dolphins, the elephants, they've had their own communication network for who knows how long. We just couldn't see it until the Arxians amplified the quantum field. Martinez frowned at the displays. Even if you're right, how does this help us? The Arxians have still disabled all our technology. We can't exactly call the Galactic Council on a mushroom phone. Sarah smiled. Actually, Captain, that's exactly what we're going to do. She turned to Maya. Remember that quantum entanglement experiment that was still running when everything went dark? I think I know why it worked. The fungi in our lab weren't just near the equipment. They were part of it. She spread out her notebook, pages filled with calculations and observations. The Arxians use quantum fields for everything. Communication, technology suppression, probably even their ship's propulsion. But they're generating artificial fields, isolated from the natural quantum networks that already exist on Earth. When they activated their suppression field, they created interference patterns. Maya finished, eyes widening, like waves in a pond hitting each other. Exactly. And those patterns are making the natural networks more visible, more active. Sarah pointed to her latest readings. We're not just detecting the networks now, we can interface with them. And if Earth's other sentient species are already using these networks. James straightened up from his microscope. We can prove they were here first, that they had advanced communication systems before we even invented writing. Martinez looked between the three scientists. And that matters because, Sarah explained, according to every first contact protocol we found in the Arxian ship's public broadcasts, sentient species have primacy on their homeworld. If we can prove Earth has multiple native sentient species, the Arxians' claim becomes invalid. They'd be forced to withdraw or face sanctions from the Galactic Council. A deep rumble shook the building. Another Arxian ship settling into position. But this time, Sarah barely noticed it. She was focused on a new pattern emerging in the fungal networks, a rhythm that couldn't be natural. Maya, she called out, are you seeing this? The dolphins aren't just communicating randomly. They're repeating the same sequence over and over. It's like they're trying to get our attention. Maya adjusted her instruments, then gasped softly. Sarah, look at the quantum signature. It's almost identical to the Arxian communication protocols. They're learning, Sarah whispered. They're adapting their natural quantum field to match the Arxian technology. They're trying to talk to us. The lab fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity wasn't alone in its resistance to the Arxian occupation. They had allies who had been living alongside them all along, communicating in ways humans had barely begun to understand. Martinez cleared his throat. So what's our next move? Sarah turned to Maya. How quickly can you scale up the fungal network? We need to establish communication nodes near every major dolphin pod and elephant herd on Earth. Give me 48 hours and a team of mycologists, Maya replied. Good. Sarah began gathering her equipment. Because we're going to need everyone's testimony when we present our case to the Galactic Council. And first, we need to learn how to speak their language. Outside, another Arxian ship passed by, its crystalline surface reflecting the setting sun. But now, watching it, Sarah felt something she hadn't since the invasion began. Hope. The Arxians had come to Earth expecting to find one primitive civilization. Instead, they were about to discover they'd stumbled into a planet-wide network of sentient species, all of whom had a legal claim to their world. The real question was, how would the Arxians react when they realized their perfect conquest was about to become the greatest legal disaster in galactic history? The beach at dawn was deserted except for Sarah Chen and her small team of scientists. Waves lapped gently at the shore as they set up their equipment, an odd mixture of cutting-edge quantum sensors and what looked like garden-variety mushrooms growing in carefully maintained containers. "Are you sure about this?" James asked, adjusting one of the fungal arrays. "The dolphins have never responded to direct contact attempts before. They've never had a reason to," Sarah replied, checking the quantum field readings. "Now they do." She nodded to Maya, who began activating their makeshift communication system. The setup looked bizarre. Petri dishes of bioluminescent fungi connected to modified seismometers and quantum sensors, all arranged in a precise geometric pattern along the waterline. But the readings showed something extraordinary. Quantum fields emanating from their equipment were perfectly synchronizing with both the mycological network and the Archean suppression field overhead. A crystalline ship passed silently above them, its presence now a common sight in Earth's skies. Sarah barely glanced up. After 3 weeks of occupation, the Archeans had grown complacent, convinced their technology had rendered humanity helpless. They never bothered to investigate small groups of scientists doing apparently primitive research on. That was their third mistake. "Contact," Maya announced suddenly, her voice tense with excitement. "Multiple signatures, approaching from the east." Sarah grabbed her binoculars. Through the morning mist, she could see dorsal fins breaking the surface, dozens of them, moving with clear purpose toward their position. But it was the quantum readings that made her breath catch. The dolphins weren't just swimming closer, they were generating complex quantum field patterns that matched their broadcast exactly. "They're not just responding," she whispered. "They're correcting our signal." The dolphins arrived in formation, arranging themselves in a semicircle offshore. The quantum field readings exploded with activity as the cetaceans began transmitting. Through their fungal interface, Sarah and her team could see the patterns resolving into clear information packets, similar to how the Archeans encoded their transmissions, but far more elegant and efficient. "This is impossible," James muttered, staring at his displays. "These communication protocols, they're more advanced than ours, more advanced than the Archeans." "Not impossible," Maya corrected, her fingers flying over her notebook as she documented everything. "We just never knew to look for them. The dolphins have been developing these techniques for millions of years, using Earth's natural quantum fields and biological networks. We thought we invented quantum communication, but we just discovered what was already here." A new alert sounded from their equipment. Sarah turned to another screen and laughed in disbelief. "We're getting signals from Kenya. The elephant herds, they're responding too. Same quantum protocols, different frequency band. They're all connected, all communicating." Dr. Chen, one of their assistants, called out urgently. "The fungal networks. The activity is spreading. We're picking up new signals from all over the planet. Whales, more dolphin pods, elephant herds across Africa and Asia. They're all linking up." Sarah watched the data pouring in, her scientific skepticism warring with growing wonder. The evidence was undeniable. Earth's other intelligent species hadn't just achieved sentience, they had developed sophisticated communication technologies that humans had been too blind to recognize. Technologies that worked in perfect harmony with the planet's natural systems, unlike the brute force methods used by humans and Archeans alike. A shadow fell over the beach as another crystalline ship passed overhead. But this time, something was different. The ship slowed, then stopped, hovering directly above their position. "They'd noticed the quantum activity," James said nervously. "What do we do?" Sarah straightened up, a slight smile playing at her lips. "We do nothing. Just keep recording." She pointed to their readings. "Look at the interference patterns. The dolphins aren't just communicating. They're broadcasting directly to the Archean ship, using their own protocols." Through their equipment, they could see the dolphin pod's quantum signals penetrating the Archean vessel's crystalline structure, carrying what could only be a message. After a moment, the ship's surface rippled with unexpected patterns, its crew clearly thrown into confusion by this impossible development. "They did it on purpose," Maya realized. The dolphins waited until an Archean ship was watching. They wanted to demonstrate their capabilities. Of course they did, Sarah replied. They're not just proving their sentience to us. They're establishing first contact with the Archeans on their own terms. And by doing it this way, they're forcing the Archeans to acknowledge them officially. James finished. Under galactic law, the Archeans can't ignore a direct communication from a sentient species. The crystalline ship hung motionless for several long moments, its surface flickering with chaotic patterns. Finally, it emitted a brief pulse of quantum energy, an acknowledgement signal, before rapidly retreating toward the horizon. Sarah began packing up their equipment, her movements deliberate and purposeful. "Call Captain Martinez," she instructed James. "Tell him it's time to move to the next phase. The Archeans just received proof of multiple sentient species on Earth, using communication technology they can't pretend not to understand. Now we force them to deal with the consequences." Maya looked up from her readings, her expression thoughtful. "We're not just fighting for human independence anymore, are we?" "We never were," Sarah replied. "We're fighting for Earth, all of Earth's sentient species, and thanks to our friends here." She gestured to the dolphin pod, still transmitting complex quantum signals into the morning air. "We're about to rewrite galactic law's definition of planetary rights." The sun rose higher, illuminating the beach where humans stood side by side with their equipment, watching Earth's oldest sentient species demonstrate that intelligence, technology, and civilization didn't always look the way anyone expected. Above them, the Archean ships moved with newfound uncertainty, their perfect conquest suddenly much more complicated than they had planned. The awakening had begun. The only question was, how would the galaxy respond to a planet that spoke with many voices, all claiming their right to be heard? The Galactic Council chamber resembled a vast geode turned inside out. Crystalline structures of various colors stretched toward a ceiling that seemed to capture and reflect the light of 1,000 distant stars. Delegates from hundreds of species filled the tiered seating, their forms ranging from the vaguely humanoid to the utterly alien. Sarah Chen stood at the petitioner's podium, trying not to show how surreal it felt to be the first human to address this assembly. Behind her, a large holoscreen displayed real-time quantum field measurements from Earth. Beside her stood Maya and James, along with their most crucial allies, a dolphin suspended in a gravitational containment field filled with oxygenated water, and an elderly elephant matriarch named Aziza, her presence made possible by the Council's advanced environmental accommodation systems. High Commander Vix of the Archean Empire occupied the respondent's position, his iridescent scales shifting between patterns of indignation and carefully controlled fury. His legal team huddled around him, frantically reviewing documents on their crystalline tablets. "This is absurd," Vix declared, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into standard galactic speech. "The humans are clearly manipulating these creatures, using primitive technology to simulate intelligence." The dolphin, who had introduced herself as Click Song of Dawn, interrupted with a series of rapid clicks. The Council's translation system rendered her words with perfect clarity. "We were achieving quantum entanglement while your species was still learning to make fire, Commander. Your own sensors confirmed our independent transmission capabilities." Aziza the elephant swayed gently, her quantum field projecting calm authority. "The mycelial networks have carried our songs and stories for generations beyond count. That humans only recently discovered this truth does not make it less true." The chief counselor, a being that appeared to be composed of shifting geometric patterns of pure energy, raised an appendage for silence. "The evidence presented is compelling. Dr. Chen, please proceed with your summary." Sarah nodded, activating her presentation system. The holoscreen shifted to show a complex web of quantum field interactions spreading across Earth's surface. "What you're seeing is Earth's natural quantum communication network, developed and utilized by multiple sentient species over millions of years. The Archean suppression field didn't disable this network. It made it more visible, allowing us to finally understand what our planet's other intelligent species have been trying to tell us. She gestured to her companions. The dolphins have developed sophisticated quantum encryption protocols that exceed current galactic standards. The elephants maintain vast archives of historical and cultural information stored in living quantum networks. Both species, along with several others we're still documenting, meet or exceed every criteria for sentience under galactic law. Vix's scales flickered with dismissive patterns. Even if this is true, these creatures had no official representation, no recognized governmental structures. Article 7, Section 3 of the Galactic Charter, James interrupted, reading from his notes. Any species demonstrating quantum-level communication capabilities is automatically granted provisional recognition pending full review. The Dolphin's direct transmission to your ship triggered this clause 3 weeks ago. Maya stepped forward. Furthermore, Article 12 specifically protects naturally evolved quantum networks as critical cultural infrastructure. The Archean suppression field has been interfering with these protected networks since the moment of invasion. The council chamber erupted in murmurs and quantum pulses of communication. Sarah could see the Archean legal team becoming increasingly agitated as they realized the full implications of their situation. The chief counselor's geometric patterns shifted in what Sarah had learned to recognize as deep consideration. High Commander Vix, did the Archean Empire conduct the required pre-invasion sentience surveys of Earth? Vix's scales went completely still, the Archean equivalent of a deer in headlights. We detected only primitive electronic communications. Our scans showed no evidence of advanced quantum technology. Because you were looking for artificial quantum fields like your own, Sarah explained. You never considered that advanced technology could evolve naturally, could become part of a planet's biosphere. You didn't find Earth's quantum networks because you didn't know how to look for them. Click Song of Dawn bobbed in her containment field. We chose not to reveal ourselves to humans until they were ready. We had no obligation to announce our presence to invaders who didn't bother to look properly. The chief counselor's pattern stabilized into a formal configuration. This council finds sufficient evidence to proceed with a full investigation. In accordance with galactic law, all Archean military forces must withdraw to a distance of not less than 3 light-years from Earth pending our final ruling. Vix's scales flushed with patterns of protest. You cannot. We can, and we must. The chief counselor interrupted. The presence of multiple sentient species using protected quantum communication networks makes this a Class 1 preservation case. The penalties for unauthorized interference with such networks are severe. The chamber erupted again as the implications became clear. The Archean Empire, which had prided itself on its perfectly legal conquests, had just committed the galactic equivalent of invading a nature preserve while bulldozing several UNESCO World Heritage sites. Sarah felt a gentle touch on her arm, Aziz's trunk, offering a gesture of solidarity that transcended species. Through the quantum fields that now linked them all, she could sense the elephant's deep satisfaction. They had all known this moment would come, had planned for it since the day they realized what the Archean invasion had inadvertently revealed. The chief counselor's patterns shifted to address the entire chamber. Furthermore, given the unique situation of multiple sentient species evolving together on a single world, this council hereby designates Earth as a protected confluence zone, the first such designation in galactic history. Sarah's breath caught. This was more than they'd hoped for, more than they'd even known to ask for. A protected confluence zone would give Earth unprecedented autonomy and protection under galactic law. Vix and his legal team were already retreating from the chamber, their scales displaying patterns that promised diplomatic repercussions. But Sarah hardly noticed. She was too busy watching the reactions of her companions. James's quiet smile, Maya's tears of joy, Click Song of Dawn's jubilant spins in her containment field, and Aziz's gentle, knowing gaze. They had done more than save Earth from conquest. They had proven that humanity's true strength lay not in military might or technological advancement, but in their ability to finally recognize, understand, and stand beside the other intelligent species that had shared their world all along. The age of Earth's isolation was over. The age of confluence had begun. 1 year after the Galactic Council's historic ruling, Sarah Chen stood on the same beach where they had first made contact with the dolphin pod. The morning sun painted the waves gold, but now those waves reflected more than just earthly light. A new structure rose from the water half a kilometer offshore, the Earth Confluence Center. Its crystalline architecture, incorporating designs from all of Earth's sentient species. The building resembled a vast coral formation made of living crystal, with sections both above and below the water. Quantum field generators, based on designs shared by the dolphins, maintained perfect environmental conditions for every species that worked within. Through the translucent walls, Sarah could see dolphins and humans moving through the underwater chambers, while elephants consulted with both species in the gravity-adjusted ground-level sections. Still hard to believe sometimes, isn't it? Maya asked, joining her on the beach. She carried a tablet displaying real-time data from the global mycelial network, now officially recognized as a protected form of quantum infrastructure. Which part? Sarah smiled. That we discovered multiple sentient species on Earth, one a case in the Galactic Council, or that we're now the galaxy's leading experts in bioharmonic quantum technology. All of it, Maya replied. Though I think my favorite part is still the look on High Commander Vix's face when Click Song of Dawn demonstrated that dolphins had developed quantum encryption before the Arctians had mastered basic arithmetic. A series of cheerful clicks announced Click Song of Dawn's arrival. The dolphin surfaced nearby, her sleek form now adorned with the subtle shimmer of a personal quantum field generator, technology that allowed her to project her thoughts directly into the air around her. What did you tell them? James asked, approaching with Captain Martinez, now Earth Defense Coordinator Martinez. We reminded them that our technology isn't for sale. Click Song of Dawn performed a graceful spin. It's part of Earth's natural heritage, protected under the Confluence Zone treaties. If they want to understand bioharmonic quantum fields, they'll have to study them the way we did, by learning to listen to the planet itself. Sarah watched as more dolphins arrived for the morning's work, each carrying quantum field signatures that identified them as representatives of different pods. In the distance, she could see a small herd of elephants approaching along the beach, led by Aziza. The elderly matriarch now served as the lead coordinator for land-based species in the Earth Confluence Council. The council itself was unlike anything in the galaxy. A governing body where multiple species work together as equals, each contributing their unique perspectives and capabilities. Humans brought their rapid technological adaptation and innovation, dolphins their mastery of quantum mathematics and encryption, elephants their deep understanding of biological information networks and their unparalleled historical archives. Martinez checked his quantum communicator, standard issue now for all Earth defense forces. The Galactic Council's annual review team will be arriving soon. First time they've sent a full delegation since the ruling. They're curious, Sarah explained. Earth is becoming something unprecedented in galactic history. Most worlds either develop a single dominant sentient species, or their multiple species compete until only one achieves technological civilization. But here we learn to work together, Maya finished. Even if it took an alien invasion for us to finally notice we weren't alone. A gentle rumble drew their attention skyward. A ship was descending, not the harsh crystalline geometry of Archean design, but a flowing organic form that seemed to merge the best elements of biological and technological engineering. The New Earth diplomatic vessel, crewed by representatives of all three species, ready to receive the Galactic Council delegation. Dr. Chen, Click Song of Dawn called out. The quantum harmonics from the mycological networks are showing interesting patterns. I believe the whales may be ready to open diplomatic channels. Sarah raised an eyebrow. The whales too. We always suspected they were watching. Aziza commented, her arrival accompanied by the subtle quantum field all elephants now generated. They are deliberate in their decisions, but recent events have convinced them that the time for isolation has passed. James shook his head in amazement. How many other intelligent species have we been sharing Earth with all this time? That, Sarah said, is exactly the kind of question we should be asking. She turned to face her assembled colleagues, human, dolphin, and elephant alike. We spent so many years looking up at the stars, wondering if we were alone in the universe. We never realized that we weren't even alone on our own planet. The diplomatic vessel settled onto its designated landing pad, its surface rippling with welcome messages in multiple quantum frequencies. Around them, the morning shift of the Earth Confluence Center was getting underway. Humans and dolphins moved through their joint research projects. Elephants coordinated global communications through the enhanced mycelial networks, and automated systems monitored the quantum fields that now openly connected all of Earth's sentient species. The Arxians thought they were conquering a primitive world, Martinez reflected. Instead, they forced us to finally see what Earth really was all along, the most diverse, most interconnected civilization in known space. Sarah nodded, watching as the Galactic Council delegation began to disembark. They came here expecting to find one species worthy of their attention. Instead, they helped us prove that intelligence, civilization, and technology don't always look the way you expect them to. Sometimes they look like dolphins using quantum fields to encode their songs. Sometimes they look like elephants storing memories in living networks of fungi. And sometimes, Click Song of Dawn added, they look like humans who finally learned to listen to their neighbors. Above them, the morning sun continued to rise over the Earth Confluence Center, its light reflecting off the crystalline surfaces in patterns that seemed to dance between the worlds of land and sea, technology, and nature, past and future. Earth's age of isolation was over, replaced by something far more interesting, an age where the planet spoke to the galaxy not with one voice, but with many, each adding its own harmony to a song that had been millions of years in the making. And somewhere in that song was a lesson that the rest of the galaxy was only beginning to understand. That true civilization isn't measured by the dominance of one species over others, but by the ability of many species to rise together, each in their own way, each adding their own verse to a story that was still only beginning.